Hello, it's Professor Muldrow once again. And in this video, I'm going to show you the beginning of Chapter 6, which is all about using files for input and output. In our cases, we'll use simple text files. These have an extension of .txt, and all files you will need for any assignments can be found in the Files area of Canvas. Now, the first thing you have to do when you're using files in Java is that when you create your main program, you need to have this line on main, throws file not found exception. In Java, that exception you see in the blue box is referred to as a checked exception. That means this is something that must be handled in some way. Otherwise, Java will not allow the code to compile. So whenever you're working with file input or output, you must have this throws file not found exception clause when you define your main program. Another thing is when you put files in your program to be used, it is generally best to put the file, the actual file, in the same directory as your .java file. Right here is my .java file for this program I'm going to use. And the two files I'm going to show you how we're going to work with are these two, Game Shows and Hockey 1. Both of these files I dragged and dropped into the same project folder that my .java file is in. It's not required that you put your text files in the same folder as your .java file. However, if you don't, then you have to specify the directory path in your code. And that can be a real inconvenience. So it's best to put the files in the same directory as the .java. Now, in order to use a file in a Java program, you must create a scanner object, which we've done right here. I'm calling it scanner input. And so therefore, I've imported java.util, which you have to access the scanner class. But notice when I make the object, I have new scanner, and then it says new file. And then the name of the file is in double quotes. So within the scanner object, you're creating a file object. And this file class is contained in this package, java.io. So whenever you want to use a file for input or output, you must do two import statements. The first one is import java.util.star. And the second one is import java.io.star. And then you make your object, your scanner object, which is associated with whatever file you want to work with. For starters, we'll work with this file called gameshows.txt. Here's another thing important about file input, especially. Before using a file for input, it's a good idea to actually open the file and take a look at the data that's in it. In our case, since these are .txt files, in Windows, you can open a file like that in the Notepad application. Here is what the file looks like. Here is what is actually in the file. Here I've got names of several classic game shows. But what I want you to notice is, you see that, for example, for Let's Make a Deal, I put dashes in between the words. For Price is Right, I have no spaces between the words. For To Tell the Truth, I put forward slashes between the words. That's important to know, because when data is read from a file, each individual piece of data from that file is referred to as a token. Now, when you do what is referred to as token-based processing in Java, each token is each piece of data before you see any white space. That means that let's make a deal, even though we all know that's 4 words, but since there are dashes and not blank spaces in between the words, that entire statement there in blue is one token. Then there is white space in between, let's make a deal and Price is Right. So then Price is Right becomes another separate token. Then we come to match game, but notice there's a blank space between match and game. Even though we have match game in quotation marks, this quotation mark and match is one token. This game and the quotation mark will be a separate token. So a token is read until white space is detected in token-based processing. So as long as you're reading something from a file, as soon as you encounter any white space, that's the end of that token. Of course, white space refers to a blank space, a tab, or a \n when you hit the Enter key. That's how the file looks. Now, as you can see here in the code, what I'm doing is I've set up a while loop, and the condition for my while loop is while input has next. This is the most common way to go through a file in Java when you are doing token-based processing. When you say .has next returns true if there is still data in the file. As soon as we're done with the data in the file, has next returns false. And so I'm just going to read the data as a string in this case. I'm adding 1 to my count variable, and then I display what the token is. And then when the while loop is over, I just say how many tokens were in the file. And the output of this program looks like this. Now I have output for 2 programs in this, but let's look at the first one. So right here, as you can see, I'm telling you what each token is. And this matches up the data to the data in the file. Token 1 is let's make a deal with all the dashes. Token 2 is Price is Right. Look at token number 3. It's the quotation mark and match. And then token 4 is game the quotation mark. Just like I said, since there's a white space between match and game, there's one token. There's a totally different token. To tell the truth, it's just one token, no separation. Pass and word wound up being 2 different tokens. Concentration, you have 2 tokens there. And then finally Jeopardy, no spaces, so Jeopardy is 1 token. And so this file has a total of 10 tokens inside of it. Now then, the other file that we're working with is hockey1, as you can see right here. So after I'm done with the output for the game shows file, I can redefine my scanner object. I don't need to create a new scanner object. I just redefine it with a different file. So now, instead of being associated with the game shows file, my input scanner object is now associated with the hockey1 file. Let's look at that data. Here is the data in hockey1. So we start with a hockey player's first name, and then a hockey player's last name, and then we have 5 integers. Those 5 integers represents the number of goals that player scored in the last 5 seasons. And I have 4 hockey players in this file. So, as you can see, once again, I have another while loop. while input dot has next. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to read the first and last name. Since the first name is what's the first on each line for each player, that's the first thing I read. Then the last name. And then when I read the first and last name, now it's the integer data. We're going to use a loop in this case to read that. So here, I have a total variable initialized to 0. And now I have a second while loop, an inside while loop. So I say while input. Now here, I'm saying while input has next int. That's because since I opened this file and looked at it before I started working with it, I know that the first name and last name is the first thing for each player. And then we have 5 integers. And as soon as that 5th integer has been read, that's the end of the data for that player. The next line starts over again with a new player. So has next int means as long as I have an integer, that means I'm reading the data for that same player. As soon as has next int returns a false, that means I've no more integer data and the data for that player is done. So all I'm doing with the integers is as I read each one, I will add it to my total variable. And then when this inside while loop is finished, here is my output. I'm putting out the player's first and last name, and then saying the player has scored this many goals in his last 5 NHL seasons. And then the inside, and then that's the end of the outside while loop when we go back to here and see if we still have more data in the file. If we do, that means start the next player. And the output for this program looks like this. As you can see, there's the first name, the last name, and there is the value of the total variable, which is the total number of goals the player scored in his last 5 NHL seasons. That matches the output after the inside while loop. Please keep in mind, I did not talk about everything that is in the chapter or the PowerPoints, so please consult both of those for more information about Chapter 6. If you have any questions, please send me an email at kmuldrow@lbcc.edu.